Saturday, April 1st, 2017, Monaco 64, home of alternative economics and contrarian views. I want to talk about trade. There's a big, important meeting between Trump and the Chinese president, Xi Jinping, next week in Florida. They're going to meet at Trump's resort down in Florida to talk about trade. And there's an article today in the FT. It says, Trump demands solution to U.S. trade deficits with China and others. And he says, President warns of very difficult summit with Xi Jinping. Reading this article, it says, Donald Trump has ordered officials to find a solution to the U.S. trade deficits with China and other major economies just days ahead of a meeting with Chinese President Xi Jinping. And it goes on to say that he signed an executive order this Friday calling for a 90-day country-by-country, product-by-product study of the U.S.'s $500 billion annual trade deficit. In my opinion, he's going about it the wrong way. That's not the problem. The problem is even bigger than just looking at country by country, and I'll come to that later. And he says as well, and I quote President Trump, he says, the jobs and wealth have been stripped from our country year after year, decade after decade, trade deficit upon trade deficit, he said. Thousands of factories have been stolen from our country. Well, I've got news for President Trump. They haven't been stolen. This is U.S. policy. Since 1971, 1973, when the U.S. closed the gold window and went on a currency system where currencies are not based on a neutral and non-political standard. The fiat money currency that floats around. That's why this has happened to the United States. But there's another side to the coin, Mr. Trump, President Trump, is that, yes, the U.S. has lost thousands of jobs, but the U.S. has been printing money, the reserve currency of the world, out of thin air to buy cheap goods from other countries. So that's the other side of the coin. These exporting countries, they're receiving, a piece of paper that's basically worthless. Yes, U.S. jobs have been lost, but it's not the fault of other countries. It's the fault of every country. Maybe the world should have stood stronger against the U.S. in 1971 and not accepted breakup of the gold standard, but that wasn't realistic because the U.S. was and still is a powerful country militarily and economically. So, yeah, and he goes on to say, he goes on to say the well-being of the American worker is my North Star. And one question I have is, have you spoken to Judy Shelton, who was one of the economic advisors for your campaign for president? There's an interesting article from, let's see, August last year in Fortune magazine, and it says, this Trump economic advisor wants America to go back to the gold standard. And in the article it says here, they ask her the question, you've written before about going back to some sort of gold-based monetary system. Is that something the U.S. could do unilaterally, or would we need to convene other nations and get them on board? And she replies, I'm not opposed to a new Bretton Woods conference, and if it takes place at Mar-a-Lago, that's Trump's resort, where he's going to meet with the Chinese president next week, I'm fine with that. But anything the U.S. does, because we print the international reserve currency, unilateral action would almost instantly be accommodated by other countries. In terms of gold being involved, some people may think of that as a throwback, she goes on to say, and she continues, but I see it as a sophisticated, forward-looking approach because gold is neutral and it's universal. It's a well-accepted monetary surrogate that transcends borders and time. If you look at the foreign reserves of the most important countries, they keep them mostly in gold. I do not want to read too much into it, but it proves that gold is not some barbarous relic. The other thing I would say is that gold has been a yardstick of value for thousands of years. It's not something that can be corrupted or can be printed out of thin air by politicians who want to help their, exporters and hurt other countries. And she goes on to say, you see, here, let's see. Yeah, it used to be, she quotes, I quote her, she says, it used to be economic doctrine that stable exchange rates brought about optimum financial flows and investment and optimum decisions about where to produce goods and where to buy and sell goods and services. And I still think it's the case that the proper monetary foundation for genuinely free trade has to be stable exchange rates. That way you can't manipulate the currency to get an advantage. Currency manipulation is like saying you're competing in the 100-meter dash, and at the last minute, one runner gets to redefine a meter as a centimeter and still be declared the winner. So that's what gold does. It disciplines, the monetary system worldwide. It's neutral. Politicians can't tinker with it or manipulate it. And some people might say, oh, there's not enough gold out there. Of course there is. It just depends on the price that they set in the new system at. It would have to be normally a lot higher than it's now. But the only reason money is still gold and held as a monetary asset by banks and countries as reserves, it's because it's money. If there wasn't enough gold out there, it wouldn't be money and people wouldn't care about it. So with that in mind, I want to show you a few charts here of trade balance. I'll start with the U.S. trade balance from 1950 to present day. If you notice there, up until the early 70s, the U.S. trade was balanced. There might have been a few, you can't even see a few surpluses and deficits, but it was hugging that zero line. And what happened in the early 70s? Well, the U.S. Killed the Bretton Woods system, the gold standard where the dollar was fixed at $35 an ounce and where foreign central banks could demand payment in gold from the Federal Reserve. So, Nixon on August 15th, 1971, closed the gold window. And in 1973, the world went on a floating exchange rate system or fiat money system. And look what happened since then. The U.S. has had trade deficits every year since then, and it's getting bigger and bigger because the U.S. is basically manipulating, not only the U.S., but every country is manipulating their currencies. Yes, the U.S. has lost a lot of jobs overseas in industries, but they've been buying things really cheaply with printed money. So I want to show you a few other countries here from, before Bretton Woods. The UK trade balance, you can see from 1955 to the early 70s there, it was pretty much hugging that zero line. The UK didn't do that well in terms of they had to devalue their currency within the Bretton Woods gold standard system. But compared to what's happening now, look at it was a lot more stable during that era of fixed exchange rates and the gold standard. Now, another country I want to bring in is Germany. Look at it from 1950 to basically, mid to late 60s. They had a bit of a surplus, as you can see there, but it wasn't like now, you know. Throughout the 50s and early 60s, it was hugging that zero line. I guess they started having a surplus there in the mid 60s because the U.S. is already abusing the system with Lyndon Johnson, you know, all the military spending for Vietnam and, you know, the Great Society experiment. There's a lot of money printing, and that was one of the reasons why eventually the U.S. closed the gold window, because they abused the system. But it still worked a lot better in terms of trade, as you can see. And the last one I'll look into here is France. The data doesn't go that far back. It's only from the late 60s. But you can even see in France, you know, in the late 60s, early 70s, it was pretty much hugging the zero line. And now it's all, you know, they've had deficits, surpluses, now, you know, deficits. It's all over the place. So, yes. So, the only way to get trade to balance within the world, the major industrial and trading countries, is to have a standard, a monetary standard based on real value, on a neutral monetary system. And the only way to do that is through a gold standard. You know, telling, you know, Trump's idea of looking at every individual country, seeing what products are, you know, producing this deficit, I think it's a useless exercise. It won't solve any problems until we remain, you know, in a monetary system that's has no anchor, that doesn't define value in a neutral way like gold, and it's dependent on politicians' whims to print more money to help their exporters. Until we do that, you know, whatever Mr. Trump, President Trump, decides to do will not work. So maybe he's going to pull a rabbit out of his hat and propose a new monetary order where, you know, money is neutral and politicians can't tinker around with it. But I wouldn't hold my breath. It would be great. So if you enjoyed this video, give me a thumbs up, share it far and wide. If you haven't subscribed to my channel yet, please do. And if you'd like to donate to my channel, there's some links below in the description. Take care. Bye.